Hello, guys, and welcome back to the IzzyVerse. Today is going to be a great show. We have a fun guest that we're gonna talk to today. We're gonna talk a little bit about comic books and some other stuff, to say the least. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about a few things that are going on. I want to let everyone know that this Wednesday, for those of you that know a little bit about Pronto Comics, I'm actually one of the founding members of Pronto Comics, and we're going to be having a Pronto's original interview. I have a couple of people lined up that's going to be showing up for the show. Also, we'll have some guests that are going to appear that ask questions and things of that nature. We're going to have a lot of fun with that one. That's this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Also coming up this week on Saturday, going to have the Elimination Chambers results, reactions, and review. All right, it's going to be a Saturday evening show. I believe it's going to start roughly around 3:30 to 4 o'clock, depending on the length of the show, as we never really know when the show is going to actually end. So be on the lookout for that. And finally, as many of you already know, I'm in partnership with Squiggy's Dugout, and they're having a sale, the great sale, comic book sale. Get your comic books for $1, indie books, collector's editions. All that stuff is there. Go to Squiggy's Dugout. You can say hi, say Izzy send you. Look for Peter. He's the guy that runs the place. Great shop, great place to get your comic book needs. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce to you all someone that I'm very looking forward to meeting. Just to give you a little bit about his credits, he's a recipient of the 2011 Inkpot Awards for Astounding Achievement in Comic Art. He's also the co-creator of Venture with Dynamo 5 creator Jay Faerber, and artist behind the series Black by Black Mass Studios, which I read the first issue today. I really liked it, liked the way that it's going. He's also done many work outside of indies in Marvel and DC, which includes G.I. Joe, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Green Lantern, Supergirl, Firestorm, Nightwing, Zatanna, New Warriors. He's done a lot. One of his best creations comes from the form from Molly Danger. We'll talk a little bit about that. But outside of that, he's done voiceover work, storyboard artist for Sony Animation. So he's done a lot. And without further ado, let me bring to you guys Jamal Igle. Hey, what's up, dude?
How you doing, Izzy? How are you?
Good, good. I was looking at all your accolades, man. You've done a lot.
I've managed to squeeze a lot in 30 plus years.
Yeah, just I'm familiar with the comic book guy, right? The comic book artist slash writer. But then when I saw the voiceover, commercials, storyboard artist, when I saw all that, I just was like, he's been there, he's done it. So congratulations on all those accolades, man.
Thank you.
No problem. So thanks for joining us today. It's an honor to have you. I could tell you right now, I've met you before in the past. And back in 2009, I got this little book.
Yeah.
Right? Omelets and Broken Eggs. I got it back in 2009. And obviously, right there's my little signature. So I got your John Hancock back in 2009. And that particular year means a lot to me because that is the year that, I just showed you Pronto Comics. That's a comic book group that I helped found back in that year. And that was the year I did it. But one of the things I used to do when I used to go to comic book conventions, and I still do it to this day, I don't buy comics in comic book conventions. I don't, I like going to panels. I like doing that stuff. But the stuff I like buying more than anything are these things, the sketchbooks. Largely because you can't really get them anywhere else.
True. Very true. I've picked up a few over the years myself, for the same reason.
So I got a big stack there of nothing but sketchbooks, all different sizes as well. Hardcover, softbound, all that fun stuff. But I don't want to bore you with all that stuff. Instead, let's talk a little bit about you, man. How is everything going on in your neck of the woods?
Things are good. Things are very busy. And it's weirdly busy because I'm trying to get a bunch of work done, and I'm going on a trip to see some of my relatives for the first time since the before time, since about 2019. So it's there's a lot to be taken care of in the meantime in the next couple of days, but I feel like I'm on top of everything.
Is it going to be a road trip, or are you flying out there?
Flying out.
Okay, that's good, because I've done the road trip. The road trip a few years ago, I did the road trip, not too far. I'll say Ohio.
Yeah.
I saw some family out there, and I just let's just go. So we did that largely because I wanted to go to Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in particular, because I love that place.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your comic book career. How you got started? That's the first question I'm going to ask.
How did I get? Well, I mean, there's two stories. The long story is I got my first job in the industry as an intern at DC Comics when I was in high school. I was Cydia's School, which you might have heard of. I don't know if they still do it. They probably do. They had a program called the Executive Internship Program. And they set up high school seniors with 6-month internships, or high school juniors and seniors with 6 months internships. So I was able to get an internship with DC Comics. This was 1989. So this was right before the Batman movie came out.
Right there, right?
Yeah. Well, that's when I got the internship. I got the internship the summer before, and then like the first half of my senior year, which was 89 into 90. So it was after the Batman movie, and then so it's but I was going to the High School of Art and Design. I was forehead deep in the comics every week in comics culture, and that was my first real exposure to the business. So I did a 6-month internship at DC, and finished an internship, went to school, dropped out of school, graduated from high school, but went to college, went to SVA, didn't finish after a couple of years, and decided to go to Canada for a bit. And
interesting.
I needed, I was 20, felt like I needed a change of scene, that whole thing. So I came back, and I was living in the city, and I decided that I was going to, make a go of trying to do this comic book thing. I was working at Jim Haley's Universe.
Yes, I know the place. I remember standing on some long lines there for some.
I was working at Jim Haley's Universe, and I was bouncing at a bar on the Lower East Side on the weekends. And I was trying to do comics, and I went to one of the old Fred Greenberger conventions when they first started doing their conventions at the Javits Center.
Yeah, I remember those conventions.
Yeah, so this was 90. I want to think this was 93.
Yeah, it's 93, 94, because I know they stopped. That was the last convention or something in Javits before New York came in.
Right.
Years later.
Yeah. No, it was. That. Yeah, it was. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it was 93. So it was May of 93. Yeah. And I had put together some samples. And I went to the show, and I got some interest from a couple of different companies, but I got hired by this company called Majestic Entertainment. And Majestic was one of these companies. I don't know if you remember these, but they were one of these companies that was doing the collectible card comics. Which, for those of you who aren't familiar with collectible card comics, they were basically trading cards that were comic panels. And you had to buy a binder and collect all of these cards to complete the story. And
I don't remember that. I'm trying to remember in that.
There was a few. Majestic was trying to do it. Defiant did it. Actually,
Defiant I'm familiar with.
Well, there's a reason why you're not that familiar with Majestic Entertainment. Is Majestic Entertainment never actually they put their first 2 card comics up, but they never put out a full comic book because the parent company that owned Majestic basically did a pump and dump. They embezzled like hundreds of $1,000s from the company and left us all screwed.
Yeah.
So they were paying like unreal rates at the time.
Yeah.
And frankly, I got spoiled a little bit. But, it was my first job in the industry. I was making $175 a page for pencils. There are people who don't make that now. But what ended up happening was I took the pages that I did for Majestic and I sent them to every editor that I knew. And Kevin Dooley, who was the editor on Green Lantern at DC at the time, got one of the packages and needed somebody to do 8 pages for an issue of Green Lantern. So that ended up being my first published comics.
Now that Green Lantern, was that the Kyle Rayner?
Yes, that was the Kyle Rayner. It was the issue 52.
52. Okay, it's in my collection. It's in my collection. Yeah, I definitely have that book. I know that because I was a big Kyle Rayner fan. At that time when they introduced him, I was like, this guy's just cool. He's an artist too. So stuff he could come up with.
I knew of it, and had I had more wherewithal at the time, I probably would have milked it a little bit more than I did. But so that was my start as an artist in the industry.
Now, you mentioned the School of Art and Design. I got a little bit of history with that school too. Mine's unfortunately is not that good. So if you remember, when you would get to art and design, you would actually have to go through like a portfolio review and some kind of test taking. I fell asleep the day I was supposed to go. And I never went. I ended up going to my zone school, and I just stood there, and the rest is history, as they say. So that's my little art and design story.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was fine. It was no big deal. I did go to college for art and things like that, which I learned a little bit. But one thing I know about art schools at that time, and I'm sure you could say the same thing, there wasn't really a focus on comics or sequential art as we know today. Now you could probably find them anywhere, right? Because it's such a hot commodity now.
Oh yeah, there's so many schools that have comics centered programs or master's programs in visual storytelling. There's a lot.
My learning how to draw comics comes back from the Wizard days, getting the Bart Sears stuff like that.
Brutes and Babes.
Brutes and Babes and all that fun stuff. So that was fun. And then just copying people's artwork, copying and just learning from what they did. So that was something I learned a little bit about. Speaking of artists, what are some of the artists that inspire you?
Oh, wow. That is always a tough question. I mean, the people that, as a kid that I leaned towards were, when I was younger and really first starting to get into comics, were guys like George Perez and Jerry Ordway and John Byrne. And then, everybody was looking at Arthur Adams as he was like, new and fresh and different. And, and then, when I got into high school and got older, I started to lean more towards artists like, Dave Stevens and Kelly Plunkett and Brian Bolland and, Al Williamson and, Mac Rayboy and Don Newton. And then just kind of like stepping forwards and backwards at the same time in like comics history. So like, that's like the, Steve Rude, was one of, and is like one of my favorite comic book artists. So there's always been sort of like this, mix of old and new, the stuff that I was interested in, as far as like comic art, and then, studying art in itself, you start looking at Leyendecker, and Leyendecker leads you to Norman Rockwell, and then Rockwell leads you to Louise Gordon, and then you go back to like Clint and John Singer Sargent, you know, Peter Paul Rubens, and, you know, it's a giant mess.
Yeah.
You know?
But you did say a lot of names that I myself, I think we're not, as far as our age difference goes, you might be a little bit older than me, but not by much, right?
Right.
Because I started collecting comic books in '87.
So yeah, we're in the same like.
So my first book, and I mentioned this before in a previous interview, my first book was Marvel Tales, which is a cover by John Byrne. It's Marvel. I can't remember the number. I think it's like 293, but it was a reprint.
Right.
Right. So that's my first comic. I still own it. It looks like garbage, by the way, but it's comics, right?
Right.
My second book, which is a bigger deal, was the Incredible Hulk cover that's done by Todd McFarlane with the Wolverine claws.
Right.
That's my second book. And I lost it, but my wife, God bless her soul, she it's Valentine's Day, so I got to give her something today. She actually bought that book for me, and I have it. I have a newer edition or nicer edition of it. But the guys I followed were, my number one guy was always Art Adams. Art Adams was always my number one. I didn't know what it was at that time. But when I became more adept to art style in general, I was noticing how he took manga and put into American comic books long before anyone else did it.
Well, it was a mix of that. He was also really influenced by Michael Golden.
Yeah, Michael Golden was a big one too.
Yeah, so there was definitely like a confluence there between those two styles, but it became something of his own.
Yeah, I agree.
It's and there's even a little Walt Simonson in there if you really
of course.
Look. So
yeah, especially with the collaborations with my favorite one will always be the New Fantastic Four. It was something really cool about. It's just 3 issues, right? But it was like you Art Adams, Walter Simonson, and then the top 4 superheroes in Marvel Comics. How could you not get that, right? It was one of those books. And then they threw in little cameos like Punisher just on a plane,
Right.
So that was some fun stuff in that. But I looked at their work and I see how their progression and how they've changed their styles as the years go. In particular, someone like Art Adams, who's still going today.
Right.
It's amazing to see his work going all the way back to Long Shot and that stuff, and then seeing it today, how it's not improved because it was always great,
right?
But it evolved to something else. Which brings me to my next question: how do you try to stay current in your style and how you create your work? What things do you do? Do you think about what you want to do differently? Do you think about how you want to just change a certain dynamic to a pose or something like that?
Oh no, I'm constantly experimenting, and then I'm constantly working on how to improve, not just how I tell stories, but the technology that I'll use to tell a story, how what I will incorporate in terms of my preparation. One of the things that I decided to do for myself over the last few years, especially, was I started inking and coloring my own work, and that's been a real process of trial and error, and even that I feel like has improved how I approach drawing characters, and I let the story, honestly, I let the story dictate how I tell the story, because I try to tell the story in very different ways. For the series that I do for Ahoy Comics, The Wrong Earth, I mix a lot between the early 2000s widescreen panel style, for example, but then I'll also throw in a lot of 60s and 70s panel layouts, or more traditional layouts for panel, or how I approach the drawing a particular figure. And then the same thing for Molly Danger. Molly Danger is very much influenced by European comics, by bande dessinée, and the layout, the way the panels are drawn, storytelling, the number of panels per page is all dictated by that format. So
yeah, and I love that constant thinking approach. It makes me think about the Superman run before the death of Superman, the Doomsday storyline, and how all the writing artist team decided that each book was going to be a certain amount of panels, which as you get the book, you don't think about that at first, right? But then when you start to do a case study on it, and you start noticing that, oh wow, this one, every panel is 9 panels on every page, then 8, then 7, and then it gets. So it just the thought process that's come into play, that maybe a small percentage of people will notice it, right? Not everybody gets to notice it, but from those small percentage, it's like you just opened up a huge Easter box, right? Easter eggs of beauty that you never noticed before, which is something I've come to appreciate when I go back to certain books, and things like that. So because it's just exciting to see what they thinking. And now that you put yourself in that place, you don't know exactly what the person's thinking, but you at least have a clue of where they were going, what they were doing. So it's always fun to that.
Yeah, no, you'd like to think so. I am, as much a fan of the industry now as I ever was, and I am reading new comics and looking at new styles all the time, and just blown away by the level of talent that exists in the business.
Yeah, I'm starting to get that appreciation again. For a very long time, I was away from comics, partly because I felt like what was happening in the industry, especially in the mainstream, is that the comics were now being influenced by the movies, even though the movies were being influenced by the comics. I feel like there's a little bit of that going on now, largely because the main companies are owned by movie companies and things like that. Where they're, we need Captain America to look like this, we need Superman to be like this, or Batman to be this way. So I started losing interest in mainstream comics. I never will stop, of course, because how could you stop loving the character you loved growing up, right? Always be a Spider-Man fan until the day I die, right? But at the same time, you kind of get tired of seeing the same tropes, and more importantly, seeing how nothing seems to stick anymore. And how everything's like, okay, this is the new status quo. And it drove me nuts for a long time, because how could the new status quo happen every 6 months?
Well,
there's a little bit of that.
If you go into it with the realization that that a company like Marvel or DC, their primary focus is maintaining these brands. So the way that you maintain the brand on a heritage series is you got to do a refresher every once in a while. You have to you have to make it accessible to a completely new reader who can't go back and read like 20 years worth of volumes. I mean, and I hear the argument made in regards to manga, and I get that appeal. I do. I get the appeal of manga as each series being its own thing, no matter how long, how many volumes there are to that series. But there's a beginning point and there's an end point, and for most of them, there's very few manga that are still completely ongoing by the same creative teams. There's very few actual series that have been internationally that have been around. I mean, the guy, creators die, creators go away, creators get bored, they get replaced by other people. If it's Tauntaun, well, not Tauntaun, Tauntaun's a bad example, but like Blake and Mortimer, or Thorgal in France, or Naruto, or Boruto, or Dragon Ball, or or Dr. Stone, or whatever. I mean, there's a start and an end point for all of these things. So it's serving two different masters. And I can understand the argument where you say I don't want to see the movie version of character X, Y, and Z in the comic book version, but then there are also those people who go to see the movie, who go to the comic shops and say, why isn't Tony Stark like he is in the movies? And part of that isn't even conscious when they do that. Part of that is that the writers and the creators are being influenced by the movies, and the character gets shaped, to be more like their movie persona, because the movie persona does well. I don't mind that they're giving Shang-Chi the 10 rings in the comics. That doesn't bother me. I think there's certain things that you can do to align these characters. Yes, there should be a second Captain America book with Sam Wilson. They should never cancel the other series. They should have found a way to have kept that going. But that's where we are now. The version of the Winter Soldier that's in the comics now is more like the TV and the film version that he was his original version. There was a very long time after the Christopher Reeve Superman movies where, yes, he was very much there was a cross pollination. But I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that ultimately. If an independent creator wants to go a different way, go a different way. But you also can't fault the independent creator of something if their property gets optioned and becomes really popular, and they decide they're going to make it more like the movie or the TV version of the same thing that they're doing. It's fine, that's the flexibility of comics.
Yeah, you make me immediately think of a show like Umbrella Academy. I don't know if you've watched it.
I've watched it. I've read the comics. They're absolutely nothing alike.
But they're fun in both ways, right?
Yes.
They're definitely fun. I can't wait till next season, to be quite honest. And they serve their area perfectly. I think both the comic book and the show. The show is obviously a reflection of the comic book, but not a hard reflection,
right?
Which is fine. I think that's okay, especially with properties that people are not as well known. You do have a little bit of freedom to do that. Or something like my all-time favorite character is Adam Morlock. He has yet to appear in the Marvel universe, cinematic universe. We know he's coming now for sure.
Right.
But at this point, it's like, do we need him now? And it's all James Gunn that's thinking about how to incorporate him in a very different way than what we're, us comic book nerds who loved him before know him, right? We're not going to get the comic book version of Adam Morlock. No. We'll see seeds of it, but we won't see the version that we know from the comics. And you know what? Let's be honest. I'll be okay with it. It's like I was telling someone the other day. It's like there was an argument. It's like we'll probably never get to see a certain character. I forgot who was the character he said, and I said I never thought we were going to see Star Fox, and it happened. So
this is true,
right? So onto continuing with our conversation in particular. What I would like to do right now, and I'm looking at some of the questions here that I brought in, but I also want to take a look at some of your artwork, your portfolio pieces. So I did grab some pieces here. I took these two in particular, some of your DC runs, Supergirl and Firestorm. Obviously, I took the Firestorm image because it's paying homage to George Perez, which obviously, our prayers and thoughts are with him this time.
Absolutely.
I know it's definitely a difficult time for him. All-time great legendary artist. No one does as many characters as he can in a page. So congratulations for giving it a try in this one. But before we even talk about the Supergirl, let's go to that Firestorm in particular.
Right.
What was it like doing something like this, where you were obviously channeling your inner George Perez and trying to do justice for his popular, talking about Supergirl on the other side? What was it like doing that? And was it something that you came up with, or did they tell you about it and you said you'll do it?
If I'm remembering correctly, they asked for me to do it because I was doing the pencils on this series, and I think I did like 3 covers during that run, and they pitched that image, that idea, and I'm a perfectionist. So, I'm not, I know, Lord knows that I'm not going to match George, but I was certainly game to give it a try at the very least. And I think one of the fun parts is if you really especially like the lower row, there's all these different versions of Firestorm that I either made up or I found like in various DC books over the years, and it was interesting to just the research alone was just very interesting. The thing about that cover especially is there's been so many homages to that cover over the years. True. It's one of those classic images that everybody seems to draw from at least like once in a while. So it was fun. It was a lot of work. I mean, the pencils on that took me like 3 days.
Wow.
So yeah.
And that's just like a walk in the park for George. You know what I mean? And I know George. I know George is the type of guy that he takes a long time to get all the pencils in because of the amount of detail he puts on it. It's to the point like he goes as far as like, if this character has a mole, we're gonna put it. I'm gonna put the mole in there. You know what I mean? It's like when no one else would think about doing it. Going to the one right next to it, paying homage to Crisis on Infinite Earths, we got Supergirl. You're one of the artists behind one of the original runs of Supergirls in the late 90s, I believe it was, or was it early 2000s? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
This was 2000. This was 2000. I took over Supergirl in 2008, and I was on the book until 2010. Mm-hmm. So I was on Firestorm from 2006 to 2008. I did a couple of issues in Nightwing in between. Or no, Nightwing was before. And then I've done so much. Oh my god. It was Firestorm,
There was Nightwing. There was Teen Titans. I know Teen Titans.
Yeah, there was Tangent, Superman's Reign.
Yes, I remember.
Was right before Supergirl. So yes, I did Nightwing. Then I just did some like Final Crisis stuff and Countdown, and then Tangent, and then Supergirl. So yeah, so that was like right around that time.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at some more stuff because I definitely want to talk about some other things. Talking about Teen Titans, another George Perez classic run that you definitely took over. What was it like doing the Teen Titans in particular? Well, they're not exactly the Teen Titans here anymore. It was just Titans. They're grown-up versions.
Yeah, but this was for Comic Shop News. This was a specialty cover for them. But I did do a couple of issues of Teen Titans, and those issues, that was actually that was before I jumped on Supergirl. So that was like my the first issue of Titans that I did was Supergirl quitting. Was she quitting the team? No, she was still on the team, and it was the Teen Titans versus like their future selves. Mm-hmm. So you had like, Connor as Superman and Cassie as Wonder Woman, and then like Kid Devil was Red Devil, and so that was a fun issue. I worked with Dan DiDio on those, and then it was cool. It was interesting because I was hoping to be on the book a little bit longer than I was, but other things needed my attention. Mm-hmm. So it worked out.
And then I see here you had a little run with G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
How that's like a kid's dream, doing a book like that. Sometimes like you watch the cartoons and now you're drawing the comic book.
Yeah, I actually had a couple of different experiences with G.I. Joe. I did a couple of issues of G.I. Joe when G.I. Joe was being produced by Devil's Due over at Image back in like the early 2000s. And then when IDW was doing their relaunch in 2013, I did covers for the first 3 issues of G.I. Joe Special Missions, and there was a third G.I. Joe book. I forget what the name of the European Missions or something. And so I did the first 3 covers for those, and then I did a bunch of covers, and then a couple of issues of interiors for that. And it's always interesting coming back to G.I. Joe because it's a licensed property. Mm-hmm. So, you have to stay within the boundaries of the licensee and the licensor rather. And, what's required. And, it's G.I. Joe is always, it's interesting. Like the issues that I did were like, one issue was a spotlight on CoverGirl, but it also featured like a bunch of other Hasbro properties like Action Man and the Human Bullet, and, but it was all wrapped around like the plot was part of her origin was she ended up on this like reality show in the style of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, because she was a model, and she ends up like saving the entire crew from like Filipino pirates. So
and her name just happens to be CoverGirl.
CoverGirl, yes, yeah.
They really thought hard on that one, didn't they? But then again, that was G.I. Joe, right?
Yeah.
That was G.I. Joe. I remember growing up watching the cartoon. I don't remember much of the cartoon. I was more of a Transformers guy than a G.I. Joe guy. But I remember growing up watching the cartoons and how every character always had like this wild gimmick that went with them. It was it was definitely like wrestlers coming to life, which we will talk a little bit more about wrestlers. And we literally had a wrestler in the cartoon by Sergeant Slaughter, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
So G.I. Joe definitely goes back. Let's take a look at some more stuff here. So I saw some collaborations, and I just couldn't help it. I saw the 2 here, Archie, and is that Jimmy or that Archie? I couldn't really tell.
That is Archie.
That is Archie. Okay, so I was right by thinking it was Archie.
Yeah, because they wanted a realistic Archie for that particular cover. So it was Archie meets Batman 66.
So how was it doing something like that, especially drawing Batman that way?
it's fun, It's how many. See, the thing about me is I like taking chances with stuff. I like doing things that seem weird and odd, but tend to work themselves out. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with the Archie Predator cover. It's just like Archie meets Predator. How do you and then this is so you get the Batman 66 cover, and then you get the Archie Predator cover where the Archie Predator 2, which was written by Alex DeCampi, and the whole premise was that the TV Riverdale gang crosses over with the comic book Riverdale gang, and then there's the Predator that's running around. So
Talking about multiverse madness.
So yeah, exactly. So I actually, this was the cover that I pitched them because I really wanted to try my hand at drawing like a traditional version of Archie. It's something that I haven't really done. I've done a few Archie covers over the years.
Yeah, and I didn't. You know what? It didn't even dawn on me until you mentioned it right now. I do see the two different versions of Archie. I didn't even realize that was the Riverdale version of Archie. Yeah. So it didn't even dawn on me. I immediately just saw Archie, Predator, and some other guy. It didn't even dawn on me. But I love looking at the Batman one in particular, just seeing how you drew Adam West version of Batman.
Yeah, I really wanted to get that right.
Yeah, and I love the Riddler. Personally, I love the Riddler. He's one of my favorite characters, so I'm curious to see what the movie version's going to look like right now. I'm very skeptical about it.
I'm willing to give it a chance.
Yeah, I'm willing to give it a chance. I'm not a big fan of the way he looks, though, personally. But, because I like my bowler cap. I like that. Right. That's the version of Riddler I always loved that I never really got.
Right.
And don't get me wrong. I think Jim Carrey's Riddler was a good Riddler for what it was worth, right?
Right.
But it wasn't the Riddler I was looking forward to seeing.
Right.
Let's go to some more stuff here. Molly Danger. You talked a little bit about Molly Danger earlier. Tell me a little bit more about Molly Danger and how she came about. What was the reasoning behind creating just a fun character?
Well, Molly really started out as sort of an experiment originally when I first came up with the character. A friend of mine and I, Rich Maurizio, were talking about the different ideas for like animated shows and what we would do, and that's where the idea for Molly originally spun out. But I had to put, I originally came up with the concept for Molly. It was like 2001, and wouldn't be able to really do anything with her until 2012. So I just sort of sat on her for a very long time, and the core idea of Molly never really changed. The fact that I wanted to create a 10-year-old superhero, a 10-year-old female superhero, but when I originally came up with the concept, the idea was it was much more sort of like, Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass kind of thing, where you didn't know if she was really a superhero or if she was just, a little girl who thought she was a superhero, or, a superhero who was pretending to be a little girl. It was really much more complex than it needed to be. So when I finally got back, and this was after I left my exclusive at DC, and I was trying to figure out, what my next step was going to be. So when I looked at Molly again as an idea to pursue, I pared it down to a much more simpler concept. She is Molly Danger. She has always been Molly Danger, and all she knows about herself is that she's Molly Danger, and that's where the idea spun out of. So for those of you who don't know about Molly, Molly is a 10-year-old superhero who's been 10 years old for 2 decades. So she's superhumanly strong, invulnerable, possibly immortal, but she's also incredibly lonely because the team that she works with, which is called Dangerous Action Response Team, or DART, doesn't allow her to mix with ordinary people because they think it's dangerous. Because the attention that she attracts from villains, and the more to the fact is that she does not age, and eventually everybody else around her does. So she's, ultimately it's the story of a little girl just looking for a friend.
Now, as far as not aging goes, she's not aging physically, but internally she is like, memories, thoughts.
She has memory. She remembers everything. She has thoughts, but she doesn't mature. So she has all of this experience, but she's still emotionally 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, anybody's been around kids long enough know that, adults have a tendency to underestimate their capabilities under normal circumstances. So, imagine having to deal with, a 10-year-old with 20 years of combat experience and superhuman strength.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Is there plans to bring her back anytime soon?
There are plans. There's plans for a second book that I've started. Unfortunately, life has repeatedly, in terms of Molly, gotten in the way. So I will get back to her at some point.
And the good news, since she's always going to be 10, you never have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's true.
It could be that's 20 years later and still 10-year-old Molly.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. The one of the good things about comics is it's not like film or television. The actors aren't going to grow old and die.
Exactly.
You can pick up from where you left off.
All right, so I saw Dragonfly, and I was laughing at it because it felt to me, again, I haven't been able to read it, but it felt very Tick-like to me in a way. I don't know if you remember Tick.
Yes, I do remember Tick.
But it did feel that way. I don't know if I'm on the right path or it's something completely different. So what can you tell me a little bit about Dragonfly and the Wrong Earth? Okay,
so the premise of the Wrong Earth is that there are various versions of the same hero. So on Sunny Earth Alpha, which is sort of a pastiche of a certain, Cape Crusaders 60s television series, 70s, kitsch, where, the good guys are good, the bad guys are kind of silly and ridiculous, and, the world is sunny. And then Earth Omega, which is the homeworld of the Dragonfly, a dark, grim crusader on a lonely, battle against the forces of evil that are, corrupt and twisted. And in the first series, they end up on each other's Earths, dealing with each other's version of the same villain, a character called Number One, who on one world is sort of a cross between, Timothy Leary and Charles Nelson Riley, and then on another world is a cross between Gary Oldman in True Romance and the MC from Cabaret.
Oh, that's great.
So,
I just love hearing that.
So there are currently 3 series in print. So you have the prequel series, which is Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man, that's the cover from the first issue. And then you have the Wrong Earth, which is the first miniseries that did, written by my co-creator Tom Pyre, and then the Wrong Earth Night and Day, which is also written by Tom Pyre, which introduces a third version of Dragonfly, who is from a slightly futuristic version of Earth.
Comics.
Comics, man, comics. And then starting in March, and that's the cover you have on the board, is they're doing a series of 5 one-shots. The first one is called The Wrong Earth, Trapped on Teen Planet, which is written by Gail Simone and drawn by Walter Giovanni. And the Dragonfly Stinger and Lady Dragonfly Man end up going to a Riverdale-like universe. not TV Riverdale.
Yeah.
Comic book.
The comic book version.
It's clearly not Riverdale.
Yeah.
But it's it's very much in that vein.
I'm looking forward to seeing that one. All right, let's get to some more stuff here, because I did put a few things. So most recently we have the story Black. I know there's a sequel which is White.
Right.
And then coming soon, Dudley Dotson, which I'm very curious to talk to you a little bit about that one. But
Sure.
let's talk a little bit about Black and then White as well, since Black was the original series and White is the current series, right?
Right.
But as I was reading the book today, I saw that there's a little bit of X-Men into it. There's X-Men. There's also My Hero Academia. I caught that with the Quark issue with mentioning the Quarks. And then what I really did enjoy is the realism behind it. Which is when I first read the book, at first when I look at a Jamal Igle book, I usually see a book that brings me back to either a golden age or silver age of comic books as far as styles go. That's what I think of when I see a Jamal Igle book. But this one brought me to a realism within a comic book that I was very impressed by, especially when you tackled the subject about the police and and everything that was going on, especially being a person from Brooklyn. Right. I'm from the Bronx. I'm a Puerto Rican from the Bronx. I may not look it and I get by a lot of things because of just my complexion in particular. Right. But just knowing what goes on in the streets, especially I'm sure you've dealt with it being from Brooklyn, New York, growing up in the 90s. I know it was tough. There was moments that was really tough growing up in the early 80s, all the way to the 90s. Things have gotten a lot better, but still some things still haven't changed, right?
Right. No, absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about Black in particular. I know you were the artist behind it, so you're part of a team.
Right. So Black was created by Quasar Sajafo and Tim Smith III. And it's actually something that, as far as like Quartz goes, as far as that particular concept, that actually predates My Hero Academia by about a decade.
That's the first time I heard the term Quartz.
I know. It was something that they wanted to do originally years and years ago, but at the time they weren't able to do it because Kwanzaa was an editor at DC for a number of years, and Tim works at Marvel as well as he's a freelance artist also. So they weren't able to do it. Kwanzaa and I worked together when he was an editor at DC, and we worked together on an issue of Smallville when they were doing the season 11, Smallville season 11.
Yeah, last to 10 seasons, and then 11 was the continuation.
Yeah. So I did an issue of that, and then worked with him on a couple of other things. And he had actually approached me about doing Black. They came over to my place and pitched me on the story, and I was immediately in. So the concept of Black, it's a world where only Black people get superpowers, and it's only a few Black people. It's a very small subset of Black people, and it's not based on skin color or anything like that. It's there is a reason behind it. I'm not exactly at liberty to speak on that. But so it's a world where only Black people get superpowers, and it's been primarily a secret for the most part, except that the government knows about it, and a corporation headed by a gentleman named Theodore Mann has been benefiting from it since the days of chattel slavery. So the book is primarily follows the young man who's on the cover, Kareem Jenkins, as he's killed by the cops in the first issue. And
his friends too, right?
Yes, his friends die, and he wakes up unharmed in the back of the van. And you discover that Kareem has a very powerful quirk, which allows his body to adapt to any physical trauma.
Yeah, and when I was reading it and I saw that scene with the police, I was like, "Whoa!" They just went there, which was very impressive. It's, to deal with those subjects in particular. Within a comic book, it's still a superhero book, right? There's still elements of superhero comic in it, but with realism in it as well.
It's the superhero. The superhero is the superhero milieu is the candy coating.
Exactly.
For the rest of the story.
So I'm definitely looking forward to continuing reading it. I enjoyed reading the first issue. I'm going to read the rest of them, and then eventually get to White, which is going on now, right?
Well, White's done. Yeah, the last issue of White came out like a week or two.
Oh, okay. So I still got time, right?
The trade should be coming out fairly soon.
Yeah. So I'm definitely looking forward to doing that. Dudley Datsun is a book that's coming up. It's by Scott Snyder, who wrote it. And you obviously illustrated. Talk to me a little bit about Dudley Datsun, and tell me where the name Dudley comes from.
That was the name that Scott pitched when he showed me his pitch document. That was the name of the title, and I wasn't going to argue with him about it. It's actually grown on me, because Dudley is in a lot of ways, Dudley is very much a kind of, he's a Dudley, He's not in a bad way, because when I think of Dudley, I think of like Dudley from Different Strokes. Like that's the only Dudley that I know. But Dudley Datsun, it's a 6-issue miniseries. It's going to be coming out first digitally from Comixology, and then later from Dark Horse in print. And it's about a young genius who inherits a device called the Forever Machine that allows him to travel through space and time. But it's not time travel. And he, through unforeseen circumstances, he is given a protector, which is Daedalus, the talking dog. I'm waiting for you to say something.
I'm just waiting. I'm just listening in. Because when I again, I know your love for wrestling. So, and I want to go there. I definitely want to go there.
Okay.
I know your love for wrestling. And when I saw Dudley Datsun, and at first I didn't know it was a Scott Snyder book at first. When I first saw it, the first thing I saw was Dudley Datsun by Jamal Igle. That's the first thing I saw, right? I said, he just made a book about a Dudley. and I saw the glasses, and I just said, well, so kudos for you on throwing that little nugget there. So I don't care how you say, I don't care what you say. I see a Dudley, and that's perfectly fine. And I remember the Dudley from Different Strokes.
I don't know if there's going to be room for a table anywhere,
but you're still working on it. You got to get some table seen somewhere.
Oh yeah,
he travels to time. He just sees a table, and he just goes, "Well, maybe I should get it someday." Just a little tidbit there. All right. I don't know how much time you have left. Just let me know.
I got a little bit of time.
Okay, so I'm going to speed through a few things, because I do want to talk about some other stuff. But before we even go there, I want to show you I want to share with you something that you did, but I also want to share you something that I did. Okay. And there's a good reason for that. So let me show you this. So are you familiar with this particular drawing that you did? And
yes, I am. I am familiar with it.
Okay. So just to give you some insight, I am one of the co-creators to Golden Girl.
Oh, okay.
And
I was not aware of that.
Yes, and that's why I did it. I put it out there. So James Battle, which I'm sure he'll watch this video sooner or later. He created Golden Girl. This is his property, right? He approached me when we were working in Pronto Comics a long time ago. Working is it's just a term, right? As we say. And we did this story in our second anthology book that we did called Loser Boy, which is it's a hilarious story. But this particular character was sidetracked and his replacement was Golden Girl. So Golden Girl was a girl that replaced him because she had some fighting ability. And then when a few years later we decided, hey, let's do a Golden Girl solo miniseries, right? And it was
Right.
it was supposed to be part of a book called Pronto Spotlight, but because of like you said, life happened. I had to take a hiatus, which unfortunately I never really came back from.
Right.
And he really wanted to get this book running. You know, I did the first few pages and so forth, and he really wanted to get this book running. So he ended up getting another person to do the book. You know, he definitely asked. He tried his best to get me back, and I said, dude, it's hard to come back. I don't know. It's once you stop, it's like it becomes very difficult to return to doing artwork. So he ended up pursuing it, and then he told me that he got you to do the cover art for it. And then, you know, now years later, I contact you about it. I wasn't even thinking about Golden Girl at the time, but when I contacted you, and then when you said yes, it's like, oh, I have to throw in the Golden Girl because it is something that, you know, you were able to take something that I helped co-create and make something beautiful from it. So, did you use my book as reference? I'm just curious.
I'm trying to remember. He sent me a bunch of stuff, so I'm pretty sure that it was probably in the file that he sent me to work from. But I don't know. I actually did another Golden Girl cover for James recently.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I gotta hit him up. I'll probably see him on Wednesday. So I definitely got to talk to him a little bit about it. But James is a great guy. He's such a good writer. So passionate, stays current. You know, he does have his opinions on things, which are very insightful. I will say that much. When you talk to James, he'll tell you things that he likes and what he doesn't like about certain things that go on, not just in the industry, but in anything in general. So when he pitched the concept of who Golden Girl was, I immediately, you know, took it. I was like, oh yeah, I'll do it. Let's go for it. And I was very happy to do the little bit that I did and let him go do whatever else he did. But it's nice to see something that you co-created by someone else and like be able years later, a decade ago. This was 10 years old, as far as I know. To see it again. So thank you for doing that. I just, it's awesome and stuff. So now finally, on to the last topic that I wanted to go over with you.
Okay.
Is it true that you are now part of AEW?
Oh. You know what? And there's a story behind this.
And this is first of all, the photo that you took, obviously you didn't take this photo for this reason, but it was so perfect.
So there is a if I were 20 years younger, I probably would have. If I'd been 20 years younger and been in the shape that I'm in now, I probably would have at least like made the effort. But the story behind this photo, okay, so Royal James. So that's kind of an inside joke because I'm friends with a Canadian wrestler whose king is Anthony Kingdom James. And so one night I had this dream that I would, because he wrestles for, and he's a manager for a Canadian promotion called Smash Wrestling. And I had this dream one night that I was like in the ring as his heater. And I was his kayfabe brother, Royal, up from the States. So I tell him that, and so every once in a while I refer to him as Kingdom. He refers to me as Royal. We are the monarchy.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so great. Thank you for posting that. When I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm taking that one. That was so good to see. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about wrestling because this particular channel is very different from other channels. As in, I'm number one. I'm a comic book guy. As you can see, I do a poll list. I started a poll list every week, which I definitely am trying to keep track of because it is hard to do a poll list.
It is. It's very hard. There's a lot of content that comes out.
There's a lot of content, but more importantly, it's like I try to keep it to the mainstays, the Marvel, the DC, but then throw in some indie stuff that's out there. But you can't. It's impossible to get it all, right?
Right.
So that's one thing. But the other thing is that this channel is really focused on. Sometimes we're going to talk a little bit about wrestling because I'm a huge wrestling guy. I'm a huge wrestling buff. I've been watching wrestling since the rock and wrestling era.
Wow.
Yeah, I go that far back with wrestling.
Wow.
One of the nice little things I have is I could tell you every WrestleMania main event all the way to probably 22, and then afterwards it just gets lost from there. And we're not going to go there now. But but when I see I see you on Facebook or Instagram talking about your passion for wrestling in general, I'm like, another comic book guy that's passionate about wrestling, because it's like either you're a comic book guy or you're a wrestling guy, but it's very rare that you find both together. Sometimes
there's a lot more than you would think.
I'm sure there is, because
wrestling Twitter goes nuts.
Yeah, like, wrestling fans are nuts. Yeah. We're nuts in general. But I also noticed that you were at the show in Queens, were you?
I was.
And so was me and my wife were there as well. So that was a fantastic match.
Yeah, I took my daughter. It was. I've actually taken her to like 3 or 4 shows now. I took her to MSG when they did the Ring of Honor New Japan show. So I missed that one. I missed my chance to go there. Yeah, I took her to Barclays Center a couple of times, once for SmackDown and once for Raw. So yeah, and I think Arthur Ashe, the AEW Grand Slam, was the last live show to us. I had the opportunity to see the MSG shows that they had at Christmas, but with like Omicron and everything, I was just not feeling comfortable being inside of a building, especially with wrestling fans.
Oh yeah.
No offense, guys, but some of y'all, the hygiene needs serious.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I was just at an indie show just this past weekend. Not this past weekend, and yesterday, but last week I went to an indie show where Mark Cardona was there.
That wasn't the. Oh, was that the one where he was wrestling Joey Janela?
No. I wish I would see that one. No, this one was it was over in Long Island. It was Creative Pro Wrestler. It's there. Go by Cap.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Cap in particular is that it's indie as indie gets, right?
But that's the promotion that the Acclaim and MJF came out of.
Yeah, right? That's the promotion. And Matt Caster was there. Yeah. Mark Sterling was there. And we had a surprise appearance by Maven, out of all people.
Maven, wow!
Yeah. Maven was there.
You know what? I shouldn't really say wow, because I see like various things like pop up every once in a while with his name attached to it. So I know he's like done like a couple of outlaw wrestling shows.
Yeah, he's trying to he's somewhat making a comeback, I would say.
Yeah.
And things like that. And he was one of those guys that there was a lot more potential in him, I think, than we got.
But I think I think Maven's problem especially was they were trying to turn him into The Rock. And
he was no Rock.
no, but you know what? That's the thing. One of the things, and you probably know this as well, is when you're dealing with WWE, is they're not huge on wrestlers developing themselves organically. They have roles that they want particular people to fill. And ways that they want them to act and behave. And they in their myopic view, they saw this tall, good-looking, light-skinned black man, and said, hey, we could turn him into the next Rock. And when it didn't work out the way that they wanted it to,
he didn't have that charisma. He was your quintessential baby face. And he fit the mold as baby face. There's not that many people out there that could go as a babyface for their entire career.
Right.
You know, I can only think of two off the top of my head. You know, Ricky Steamboat, Rey Mysterio, that you can't see him become other, you know, be a villain or anything like that.
Well,
Even though
no, because
Ray was
Ray was WCW. He was
yeah,
heel for a while.
those are the years that we don't talk about where the mask was off, right? I don't think that ever happened. That's a different Ray. That's Ray.
That's Ray.
That's Ray. I know about that one. You know, with the horns. I remember that one.
Yeah.
But you know,
God damn you, Eric Bischoff! I mean, seriously.
The fact that
nobody wants to see masked Mexican wrestlers. Oh my! Chris Jericho had Juventud Guerrera on his podcast a couple of months ago. It was really interesting. Like the decision to take the mask off of Juvi was just like. There's basically Bischoff saying, you know, he's a good-looking kid. Why do we have him in a mask, and not really caring about like the traditional lucha libre and
there's some weird stuff that goes on with Bischoff and how he thinks sometimes. I think
Bischoff's he's a TV guy who became a wrestling guy as opposed to somebody who like he knew the business a little bit, but he was a guy who came up through. You know, working for Turner and then being
working in AWA out of all places.
Yeah,
he started there. He was a ringer. He was he wasn't a
announcer. He was an interviewer.
He was an interviewer. Yeah,
he was
an interviewer.
Yeah, he came up through the Brian Saxton route. Like,
yeah, and he just made it. He just found his way in and got in. And you know what? For the most part, he contributed a lot. So you gotta give Bischoff a lot of credit for what he's done.
No, I give Bischoff all the credit in the world for what he managed to do. But I think in a lot of ways it hurt the business more than it ultimately helped. I mean, yeah, a lot of guys were getting some really decent paydays. But at the end, you know, if you can't, you know, sustain those numbers, they had that pop. You know, we all know about the 86 weeks. You had that pop. But once it started to die down, and once they could no longer compete with WWE in terms of content, and then it all ended up became about the spectacle.
And it was a lot of two levels, right? There was your main event card group, and then you had your cruiserweights, your mid-tier guys. And the problem that they had, and I think to Bischoff's credit, I put this on Bischoff in a way, they never could get past that level, right?
Right.
So they had to leave, you know, and luckily for many of them, WWE was that doorway out, right?
Right.
And, you know, we think about the Radicals, you think about Eddie Guerrero, you think about even Benoit, you know, the name that nobody wants to talk about, but you think about those guys and the fact that they had to leave. Jericho had to leave.
Right, because there was a ceiling for him.
There was a ceiling for
WCW. And a lot of that ceiling was because of Hogan.
Yeah, and Jericho was one of those guys. I personally love Jericho. I fell in love with Jericho the moment he became a Jericho-holic character.
Right.
That character is by far one of the greatest characters I've ever dealt with. Rufus and all that. Oh my goodness, I loved it. And then the fact that, you know, I'm sure you were watching at that time when he shows up in WWE. Those of us who were in the know, we knew he was coming. We just didn't know how he was coming.
Right.
You know, so there was, and you did at first you didn't think about that countdown, right?
They spent time building up that countdown. They spent time,
but we didn't think it was that. We didn't. It didn't dawn on us that countdown was in relationship to Jericho, though we knew Jericho was coming.
But the thing is they brought Jericho in and they immediately put him in the main event scene, and that worked to his advantage. You know. They made him look like a star. He performed like the star that he is. And I can't even say is. And it worked. Yeah, it worked. That pop worked for him. I think the current equivalent that I can honestly say is Keith Lee.
Yeah,
if Keith Lee walked into AEW on night one and looked like freaking Superman,
the way he was throwing Isaiah.
Oh my!
Even I saw the photo you put, but even when I was watching it live, and the way he, obviously Isaiah did a little bit of the jumping to go with it, but still, it was like, whoa, he went high.
Well, you know what? That's the thing. I've seen Keith Lee a couple of times. Like, even if Isaiah didn't jump, he was going flying.
He was gonna go high. He was gonna go pretty high.
He was going high and far.
So with that said, what do you think is going wrong in wrestling, in really the WWE in particular? What do you think it is? Because I have my opinions as well. But what do you think is going wrong with WWE, and pretty much what's going right in the AEW?
I think what's going wrong with WWE really has to do with just this sort of myopic mindset, and it goes back to what I was saying. They have characters that they want to lean on. They really seem to bristle against the idea of someone getting over organically. Mm-hmm. There's very few times in the history of WWE where a wrestler has been allowed to get over on their own in spite of being pushed.
And in many cases, those organic stars, those stars that they build up organically, regardless of the WWE machine. The machine was not behind them in that organic push,
exactly.
Right?
No, exactly.
So I immediately think of two in particular. I think about Becky Lynch and Daniel Bryan. Mm-hmm. They put it upon themselves in some way to do it, right? Daniel Bryan started the yes chant long before he became an organic, baby face, right?
Right.
But and then Becky Lynch's character morphed into this tweener female Stone Cold like character.
Right.
When she was supposed to really be a full on heel, which they're trying to still do now.
Right.
And it's not working because, come on, her and Seth Rollins are fighting with who has the better outfit.
Right. No, the people like them too much. But I mean, even if you go back in the day and you think about, like, I'll give you the perfect example. Like, let's look at The Rock.
Oh, I was there. I was in Survivor Series. I was in that Survivor Series.
I know, but they brought him in. They wanted him to be a smiling, happy baby face, and they tried it for like 6 months and it wasn't working. And I think had they not given him the room to try some things, they would have sent him back down to Florida.
Yeah.
The same thing with the Shield. The Shield came in as heels. They were supposed to be healers. They came in as heels. They turned into the most popular faction in the company. Yeah. The same thing with the Dudley Boys. The Dudley Boys got over on their own.
Yeah, they were a big ECW.
No, absolutely. They got over on their own. And that's the thing. It has to be organic. Mm-hmm. You can't. They've tried. The only reason why Roman is working now is that he's finally leaning into the same characteristics that you saw when he was in Florida, when he was wrestling for Florida Championship Wrestling. When he was, what was it?
I don't remember the name. I don't remember. He had a different name, of course.
Yeah. It's just like, I think it was his real, like, first, like, leaky. I forget how. But yeah,
it escapes me too. It's like
that was. But his original gimmick was very much like his current, like the current, like tribal chief. Gimmick, And that's the thing. It's like you take someone like Jon Moxley, who wasn't, he walks out of WWE tired and angry, and they're giving him all these dumb gimmicks, and he walks out with like a gas mask. He's supposed to be like,
gets the injection shot on his butt.
And he walks into AEW on his first night and gives Kenny Omega, arguably the greatest wrestler to come out of Japan in the last decade, a paradigm shift on top of a stack of giant poker chips, like it's an episode of Batman 66. Like,
it really is,
And he's immediately embraced, and he becomes even bigger. So you can't. And that's the thing, is that they keep leaning on dumb characters, inorganic pushes. They just don't, they don't seem to understand that you can't force fans to like a wrestler or to dislike a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's not 1950.
Yeah, and I think that's part of their problem.
People were too smart for that.
Yeah, and I think what happened in the 90s was forced.
Mm-hmm.
The Attitude Era was just forced. It was something that wasn't the direction McMahon really wanted to go, but it was a direction he had to go.
Right, because you follow the people.
Because before that, he was New Generation, and the only real talent he had was at that, not real talent, because there was plenty of guys there, but the two guys he always put his shoulders on was Brett and Shawn,
mm-hmm.
and it was always Brett was the baby face, Shawn was always the heel,
right?
And then Austin in particular, when he came in, he gave him the ringmaster gimmick, right? Gave him the $1 million title. It didn't work at all. No. And then you saw Austin, which I knew there was something in Austin when I saw him in WCW.
Mm-hmm.
When he was in WCW, I was like, this guy is something, and I'm not saying that because I could just spot talent a mile away, but he had a charisma that wasn't like anyone else.
No, but you could say the same thing about Brian Pillman.
Brian Pillman, what he could have been, even though he you ask me, he still falls in the Hall of Fame category just he's done, right?
I absolutely agree. It's just, and I don't know if you feel the same way. It's just weird, like being old enough to have seen Brian Pillman wrestle, and now we're watching his son.
Hit a carbon copy of him, no less. Like, I'm just waiting. You know what's funny? Whenever I see Junior talk, I'm like, dude, that's not how you're supposed to talk.
No,
you're supposed to have a raspy voice, man. Right? And you see the glimpse of, the Bengals version, talking about the Bengals, right?
Right.
I was going for them yesterday, but the Bengals version of Brian Pillman, right? That version, Flying Brian, that was Flying Brian. And you see that his son is doing it. I just can't wait for the day comes if he actually will try to take that persona of his father, the loose cannon version.
He wasn't doing he was kind of doing the loose cannon in MLW, but not really. I don't know how far like the Varsity Blondes.
I don't know if they're gonna go far.
I don't know how far it's gonna go. I know Julia is scheduled to become a member of the House of Black at some point.
Yeah. So you
can see that coming.
You can see that coming and stuff like that. But the potential that he has, especially because he is that talented. I've seen his work. He's that talented. I think they told him to work on something with MJF. I think it almost felt a little flat though.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an opportunity for him to kind of like show what he could show, especially we were in the show, the Grand Slam show when they fought. And MJF just ripped him one, and when the things he was saying, I was like, "Oh, he went there." So in all fairness, I just personally speaking, and we're gonna wrap this up now. I feel like WWE just returns to its mode of where it's back to new generation mode, where we just have these characters that
it's worse than new generation mode. You look at NXT, we've got rappers, we've got a serial killer, we've got a girl who falls asleep in a corner.
I haven't seen NXT.
A magical girl.
I haven't seen NXT to tell you. I know what you're talking about, but I
tried.
It's hard. It's hard to enjoy it. That's the part.
It's very hard to enjoy it, and in the history, and I will still say in the history of recent dumb moves, is you got Braun Breaker, who looks like Rick Steiner and sounds like Scott Steiner.
He looks a little bit like Scott too.
He looks a little bit like Scott.
But they're brothers, so it makes sense.
He looks like young Rick Steiner and sounds like Scott Steiner, but you're not calling him Braun Steiner.
Yeah, that's a whole Scott Steiner issue. I'm sure that's a Scott Steiner issue.
I'm sure it's a Scott Steiner. I'm sure it's more a WWE. We want to control the trademark issue.
But I could deal with Braun Breaker as a name. I think that's a name that could work. It takes time, but I think out of the names, the dumb names they've come up with,
I'm not even talking about
they come with dumb ones.
I'm not even talking about the name. It's the idea that you have a second generation Steiner in your promotion and you're not capitalizing on that.
Who looks the part, who sounds the part, who dresses the part.
Yeah, exactly.
Who embodies Steiner. He is Steiner, right?
He is a Steiner,
pretty soon he'll get that goatee, that beard would come up. I'm sure.
He's got the goatee. He's got the goatee. But I'm just, they'll probably sooner or later they will call him up to the main roster, and that's what
we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens from there.
Then they'll change his name to Steiner because I
don't know if they'll do that. I think at this point he'll be Braun Breaker. I don't think that's going to change. I think Walter will stay as Walter because Gunther's not going to work. That's what I think.
Well, he's Gunther. He's Gunther for now.
Yeah, I don't think Gunther's going to last. That one I don't think is going to last. That was just bad. That one was just all around bad, especially when you called him Walter for so many years prior.
Yeah,
that's just stupid.
It doesn't make any sense.
He didn't come in as Gunther. He came in as Walter. And then he comes up, my name is Gunther.
Walter carries a pedigree.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But, WWE likes to pretend for the most part, they like to pretend that no other promotion exists unless you need Mickie James to be in the Battle Royal because you don't have enough female wrestlers on your roster anymore.
Yeah, that Royal Rumble was a little disappointing this year.
Yeah,
I was a little disappointed by it. I was, as always, Royal Rumble is you always get hyped for it, and then when you get a bad Royal Rumble, you're like, opportunities that you had.
The opportunities that you had, the Keith Lee, going up against Brock for that.
I honestly, thought I don't know about you, but I actually thought that Lashley versus Brock is a better WrestleMania card than Brock versus Roman.
No, I would agree.
That to me would have been the WrestleMania card.
I would absolutely agree because if you actually let Lashley be Lashley and not hamstring him, and I mean, there's just Brock's okay. I mean, he's Brock Lesnar. But I just think it's really incumbent on them to really start pushing other talent and really trying to build stars. And Lashley's almost 40.
Yeah, their main eventers are usually in their 40s now.
Yeah, there's a shelf life. Even for somebody who is as athletically gifted as Bobby Lashley is. And it's just.
And he should have been main eventer years ago, but he had to build his character, which he ended up having to do in Impact.
Yeah, which is fine. But then you bring him over to WWE, you immediately try to make him a babyface, and then when that doesn't work, you stick him with Leo Rush.
But you put him against one of the best heels at that time with Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn, that particular storyline was awful.
Yeah.
and it was so stupid because you could tell he wasn't into it, right? You
No.
could see it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But they smartened up when they got MVP involved,
Yeah.
and that was the good thing. They screwed up the Hurt business, but
Yeah.
which there was longevity to that. There were like a new version of Evolution or a Horseman, which would have been really cool, and you could get a certain community and with them, like, yeah, this is our group now. You know what I mean? And it just they continuously drop the ball. And the thing is, they don't care. That's what I've learned to come across. That it doesn't matter. They're still rolling in dough. When that money runs dry, that's when they'll start caring again. And hopefully sooner rather than later, because I still love WWE, and I still have my heart for it. I'll watch all of
it. I tolerate WWE and hope for better.
Yeah, same here. I'll watch all the big cards. I may miss some of the smaller ones here or there, but overall, I'm gonna watch it because it's how I connected with my father when we were kids. That's why I'm so into it.
I hear you.
Bro, it has been a blast having you here, man. It was such good conversation. We talked about a lot of things. I'm happy we had this opportunity. I know you're gonna be in Big Apple, am I right?
Yes, I am.
We will see each other there face to face. So definitely show up there. So before I let you go, Jamal, is there anything you'd like to plug or talk before we finish this conversation?
Okay. Plugs. Okay, so I talked about the covers that I'm doing for the Raw on Earth one shots. Trapped on Team Planet is coming out in March by Gail Simone and Walter Giovanni. And let's see, I also did a cover for Archie's free comic book day offering, the best Archie comic ever. So that'll be out on free comic book day. The Raw Earth trades are all in store. Hopefully they will do a new edition of Black as a trade paperback fairly soon, but the trade paperback for White should be out in the next few months. And Dudley Datson will be out, if all goes well, sometime either in the summer or early fall.
Great. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So we'll talk soon, man. I'll see you in the show. Take care, bro.
Good night.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time in the IzzyVerse. Wednesday is our Pronto Comics interview, so be on the lookout for that at 7:00. We'll talk then. It was great having Jamal Igle here. We are going to have the Elimination Chamber as well. That's coming this Saturday. Again, it was a blast having him. Don't forget, if you need comic books and you need a place to go to Squiggy's Dugout, again, on New Rochelle. Go there. You could ask for Peter, and he could help you out getting you some books. Until then, it's been a blast, guys. Thank you for having me, and we'll see you next time in the IzzyVerse. Take care, guys.